name's Gill Braulik. I'm originally from the UK, but I'm a specialist on whales and dolphins, and I've spent the last 25 years or so working on endangered river dolphins and coastal dolphins throughout Asia and some parts of Africa. But I'm here this time. I've been coming to Pakistan for many years, for more than 20 years, and I'm here now to participate with WWF and the Punjab Wildlife Department and Sindh Wildlife Department on a full survey of the Indus River Dolphin throughout its range. The Indus Dolphin was certainly my favourite of all the river dolphins, and it is really a unique creature. So it doesn't look anything like the marine animals, marine dolphins. So they're brown in colour, kind of the colour of chai, and they're almost blind. So they have only a tiny little pinprick for where an eye would be normally. And they have a very long, thin rostrum with long interlocking teeth. And they never go anywhere near the sea. They're only in freshwater. And they have unique behaviour. So they're unlike marine dolphins that form big groups and jump and swim together. Indus River dolphins are in very loose groups, so you only ever normally see one or two surfacing very quickly. And we think that they swim on their sides. So they turn on one side and they swim along the bottom with one flipper trailing along the bottom. And they use sonar to navigate because the water's so turbid. But I think the most interesting thing is that they're only found in Pakistan. So Indus River dolphins are an endemic species to Pakistan, only in the Indus River, and they've been there for millennia, for millions of years. So there's been dolphins swimming in the Indus probably since before there were humans walking around on these lands. So they're just intimately entwined with the history and the culture of this land. So actually I did my PhD research in Pakistan. I was very lucky to live here for 5 years and spent a lot of time on the Indus River. So I did a whole number of different studies on the Indus River dolphin, including looking at where they occur, what numbers they occur in, what habitat they use, what the main threats are, and looking at different reasons that they've declined. And apart from that, I've spent a lot of time living in Tanzania and East Africa, also working on marine whales and dolphins. Yeah. So river dolphins are really unique creatures, and there's only a few rivers worldwide that actually have freshwater dolphins. Most people are familiar with animals that live in the sea, like the traditional dolphins, but there are freshwater dolphins in only a small number of rivers worldwide, including the Ganges, Brahmaputra, Yangtze, and the Amazon. And so these are really specialized dolphins, and they're all, because they come in such close proximity to people, because rivers are so intensely used by people, that they are all incredibly endangered. Yeah, well, Indus dolphins rely absolutely for their entire future on Pakistan and on the Indus River. And as you know, the Indus River is in demand for so many different uses. It's a very arid country that's very water stressed, and so the Indus River is used to provide water for people, for industries, for drinking, for irrigation. And so there's a lot of competing interests for this very, very valuable water resource. And Indus dolphins and much of the rest of the aquatic life in the Indus is really under threat because of this competition over water. And so the irrigation dams that have been built, the barrages, basically fragment the Indus habitat for Indus dolphins so that they're in different isolated populations separated between key dams. And so in the past, we know that like 150 years ago, there would have been dolphins swimming through the Ravi in Lahore, in the Sutlej, the Jhelum, even in the Bias, in the upper reaches, all the way down to the Indus Delta, and they could have swum freely through this just amazing, wonderful, wild river for thousands of kilometers, moving downstream in the flood season or downstream in the dry season where there's more water, moving upstream in the wet season to avoid the fast currents. But now with this huge network of dams, those movements are no longer possible. And so they're just surviving in these small fragments of habitat. And as well, because of the Indus Water Treaty, where some of the rivers are now dry, so the Sutlej and the Ravi have very low flows, so that's no longer dolphin habitat. So yeah, there's a lot, it's a very complex world that the dolphins live in. So yeah, this is a good question. So the very first survey that we ever did of the Indus River Dolphin, which was run in 2001, which again was a collaboration between WWF and the provincial wildlife departments. That very first survey, we recorded just over 1,000 Indus dolphins. And since that time, every 5 years, we've repeated that huge effort to do these range-wide surveys, and the numbers have been slowly increasing. So, and actually there's evidence from back in the 1970s where there were surveys run by a number of different people, including Sindh Wildlife Department, that numbers in the 1970s were really low. And that's because back in those days, dolphins were not protected under the Wildlife Protection Act, and they were hunted by specific groups of people that used to eat them. And then the Wildlife Protection Act in the mid-70s protected dolphins, and that hunting stopped. So ever since then, the numbers seem to be slowly increasing. And the most recent survey that was conducted in 2017, there were close to 2,000 animals left. So it's very positive news that the numbers are increasing, but 2,000 is still an incredibly small number for an entire species. Imagine if there were only 2,000 people left, it would be a very precarious situation. So although it's really positive news that the numbers are going up, it's still important not to be complacent, and there's a lot we need to do still to safeguard those remaining animals. So there's 2 or 3 main areas that really need work in order to safeguard this population. The first is the issue of pollution, and that a lot of the rivers are receiving huge amounts of waste, and this is really an issue not just for dolphins but the entire ecosystem and the people that live along the rivers. The second is the issue of water, and the fact that having a flowing, functioning river ecosystem requires there to be sufficient water to flowing all the way to the delta. And the third one is around sustainable fishing. And although there's many communities that rely on fishing for their livelihoods, and that's incredibly important, there are some gear types that are particularly damaging or illegal, and there are some gear types that are much less harmful to dolphins. And because they're mammals and they breathe air, dolphins can get entangled in certain fishing gears, and then they drown. So it's about working with communities to develop alternative livelihoods, to increase awareness about the incredible importance of this endemic species, and to try to improve the fisheries management and the types of gears that are used. I mean, actually, river dolphins, throughout the world, the issues are all very similar. And some of the reasons that they're so endangered is largely because rivers are so heavily used by people. So the habitat is changing as people develop the banks and the floodplains, as there's upstream dams that suppress the floods, as well as fishing for local communities. So these challenges span every river that there are river dolphins. Yeah, I think having the people that live along the banks of the river and that are immersed in that kind of habitat is really, really important for having them be the champion of this species. And actually, I think because it's such a charismatic animal and it's found nowhere else, that once we explain to people how important this animal is and that it's only found in Pakistan, that its future is completely reliant upon that one river, and the people that live along the banks of the river can really make a difference in its survival. That's really, really important. So working to increase awareness amongst children along the banks of the river. Things like citizen science, now that mobile phones are so widely used, there's an enormous amount that can be done by involving the people that live along the rivers with recording sightings and helping to document habitat quality. So really the future of the dolphin is tied to the people that live along the riverbanks. And so if we can instill a sense of pride and ownership in the species, then that goes a considerable way to saving it. Yeah, I think the partnership between WWF and the Engro Foundation is incredibly positive. And I think for a long time, for dolphin conservation, we've been reliant on trying to get funding from outside the country. And it's really heartening to see that the species has value, is considered to have value in Pakistan, and that there are companies that are willing to work towards its future. And so removing that reliance on having to raise money from outside. And it's really to really turn around the status of the Indus River, it requires long-term investment in long-term conservation projects, in long-term research projects, and building the capacity of the people doing the research as well as working with communities. So I think that the funding provided by Engro goes a long way to starting that process.